You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In States of Shadows Part 2, the hunt for the truth plunges deeper into Raven City's darkest corners. Jack Bennett and Julia Holloway stand at the edge of a conspiracy that reaches far beyond a single crime scene, where hidden voices whisper from abandoned basements and long-buried secrets claw their way back to the surface. As threats grow more personal and shadows lengthen at every turn, they'll confront a chilling question. How many more lives were lost to a horror no one believed existed? Every creak in an empty hallway, every flicker of a street lamp, carries a warning. Someone or something watches their every move. With time running out and danger closing in, they must follow a trail of cryptic clues before the darkness swallows them whole. Brace yourself for hair-raising suspense, a tide of slow-burn dread, and a twist that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Subscribe now to Soul Studios so you don't miss Part 2 of Shadow of Estates, because the darkest secrets are only just beginning to surface. My statement at the precinct went as smoothly as it could have. Marcus and another detective recorded my account of finding the tape, then logged the mini-DV cassette as evidence. They made 2 copies, one to send to the lab for enhancement, to see if any background noise or images could be clarified, and one that Marcus kept for working the case. The original was placed in an evidence locker. Despite the routine procedure, I felt a pang watching the tape slip out of my possession and into a plastic bag. It was like handing off a piece of the woman's voice, her last cry for help. But it was for the best. It would be safe there. The station buzzed with morning activity, phones ringing, officers coming and going, the smell of burnt coffee and photocopier toner in the air. I recognized a few faces, but kept a low profile as Marcus ushered me around, not wanting to advertise exactly what I had brought in. By the time we were done, it was nearing midday. Marcus had business to attend to, namely, briefing his captain and assembling a small team to quietly start digging into Delaney and that house before word got out. He assured me they'd approached Delaney's executor to get a list of staff and associates, including the caretaker. Officially, it would be under the guise of tying up any loose ends related to his death, not yet revealing the tape's existence. They wanted to keep things discreet until they had more to go on. Before I left the precinct, Marcus pulled me aside. "Jack, I know I can't exactly direct your actions, but please be careful what you do next. If you're going to snoop around, let me know. And don't confront anyone directly, especially not that caretaker if you find him. We don't know how dangerous he is." "I understand," I said. "I'll be careful, and I'll keep you in the loop." He seemed to accept that. We exchanged our updated contact info and I headed out, stepping from the fluorescent-lit halls of the station back into the daylight of Raven City. The clouds had thinned, and weak sun cast a pale glow over the wet streets. I stood on the precinct steps for a moment, inhaling the city air, exhaust fumes, a whiff of hot dog cart down the block, the after-rain smell of the harbour a few miles away. My mind was already churning over what to do next. The police would take the methodical approach, interviews, warrants, labs. That could take time. I felt a restless urgency, a need to keep moving. Some part of me was also aware that while the police investigated, a good story might be brewing, the kind I used to chase. Perhaps I could write about this one day, but that was secondary. Right now, I had personal skin in the game. I was connected to that tape, and maybe, just maybe, to Claire in a way. I decided to retrace the start of this whole nightmare, the Delaney house itself. The estate sale had only given me a cursory look. Now that it was presumably closed up, I wanted to see it again without the distractions of other people around, perhaps find any clue that might have been overlooked. Within a half hour, I was driving my old Honda Civic out of downtown towards Sycamore Street. The car was temperamental at best, but today it behaved, chugging along as the city scenery gave way to the quieter, tree-lined streets of the affluent neighbourhood where Delaney's estate sat. Ravenswood, it was called, ironically apt. Back in the 1900s, it was where the industrial barons built their mansions. Many had since been parcelled off or converted into bed and breakfasts, but some, like the Delaney house, remained intact behind wrought-iron gates and old money. I parked a block away, not wanting to draw attention by pulling up directly in front. As I approached on foot, the neighbourhood was still. The rain-washed street was dappled with sunlight and moving shadows from the oaks that lined the sidewalks. I passed by the black iron gate, which was now closed and padlocked. Through the bars, the Delaney house looked exactly as it did yesterday, imposing and silent. A hand-lettered sign hung on the gate, estate sale closed, no trespassing. That wouldn't stop me. I walked around the side of the property, following the tall hedge that bordered it. Leaves glistened, dripping leftover rain onto my shoulders as I navigated around to the back fence. There, out of view from the street, I found what I was looking for, a spot where the fence didn't meet the ground, likely pushed up by a tree root. I'd noticed it as I left the day before. The ground dipped just enough for a person to squeeze through with some effort. I glanced around to ensure no one was watching from neighbouring homes. Everything was quiet. With a quick breath, I knelt and wriggled myself under the fence, getting mud on my jeans and snagging my jacket on a splinter. With a bit of cursing and a final push, I emerged inside the estate grounds, behind a cluster of overgrown rhododendron bushes. The back of the Delaney house loomed above, its windows like blank eyes staring out. My heart was thudding with that mix of fear and adrenaline I used to get doing undercover research or slipping into places I wasn't supposed to be. It had been a long time since I felt that. Part of me relished it, alive with purpose. The estate's backyard was expansive and in better days likely manicured. Now it was largely overgrown, tall weeds and grass, unpruned rosebushes crawling wild. I could smell the damp earth and something faintly sweet, perhaps the last remaining blooms of those roses or another late-blooming flower. It was quiet enough that I could hear water dripping from the gutters and the distant hum of a lawnmower from another street. Keeping low, I approached the house. The back door, I remembered, was off a sunroom that adjoined the main dining hall. During the sale, they'd kept the back doors locked and funneled everyone through the front, but perhaps a careless organizer left something open. If not, I'd have to get creative. I tested the handle of a side door that led into what looked like a mudroom. Locked. The windows on the ground floor were mostly old-fashioned French panes. I went to one that was partly ajar. Someone had left it cracked open, perhaps to air the place out or from the humidity of so many visitors yesterday. Luck was with me. I gently slid it further and, with a bit of effort, hoisted myself up and through into what turned out to be a study or library. I landed clumsily on a hardwood floor with a thump, startling a cloud of dust from a nearby curtain. I froze, listening. The house was silent except for the ticking of another clock somewhere and the faint sigh of air through the cracked window behind me. No footsteps rushing to the noise. Good. I straightened up and took in my surroundings. This was indeed a study. Built-in shelves lined two walls, mostly emptied by the estate sale, save for a few heavy volumes nobody wanted. The curtains were drawn, letting in only thin light, which gave the room a sepia tone. The air was musty, and I could smell old cigar smoke embedded in the walls from years of habitation. On a large wooden desk in the centre, there were a few scattered papers, likely stuff the sellers deemed worthless. Old bills and an empty inkwell, that sort of thing. I quietly moved through the doorway into the main hall. The house felt different without people, more oppressive, its emptiness heavy. My footsteps were muffled on an ornate runner rug that stretched down the hall toward the foyer. The place was mostly stripped of valuables, but bulky furniture remained. A grandfather clock, perhaps the very one I heard, now silent. Heavy cabinets, a hulking armoire. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that snuck in between the curtains. I passed the spot where I'd seen the caretaker lurking. In daylight, it was just a benign corner by a china cabinet, but I could almost superimpose the memory of him standing there, watching. A chill prickled my arms. I shook it off and continued, finding my way to the staircase that led to the second floor. I decided to first look for the room with the rose wallpaper. In the video, behind Claire's frightened face, I'd glimpsed a distinct pattern of roses. If the footage was indeed shot in this house, that wallpaper could identify the exact room she was held in. I started upstairs, the wooden steps protesting under my weight. The second floor was a warren of bedrooms and guest rooms. Many had been opened for the sale, evidenced by open doors and a few scattered price tags still stuck on door frames or furniture. I walked slowly through each room, scanning the walls. Most rooms were painted solid colours or had striped wallpaper. No roses yet. Halfway down the hall, I found a closed door. A sign taped to it read, "Private, do not enter." The estate sale had apparently cordoned off that area. Naturally, that piqued my interest. The door was locked, but the flimsy tape and paper sign wouldn't stop me. I examined the lock, a simple old internal door lock, likely easy to pop. I had a small pocket knife on my keychain. Using the thin flathead screwdriver attachment, I jimmied the lock with some force. After a few tries and a sharp wiggle, the latch clicked. I carefully turned the knob and opened the door. A waft of stale, cool air greeted me. I stepped inside, squinting to let my eyes adjust to the dimness. This was not a bedroom. It looked like a private sitting room or office that had been off limits. Heavy curtains were drawn over windows, but I could make out a large armchair, a side table with an old rotary phone, and on the walls, my heart skipped, wallpaper patterned with deep red roses. I felt for a light switch and flicked it. A single floor lamp in the corner buzzed to life, casting a weak yellow glow. The rose wallpaper was clear now, climbing halfway up the walls beneath a rail, above which the walls were painted a dark green. It matched what I'd seen in the video. This had to be where Claire recorded her message. I stood still for a moment, listening to the quiet and trying to imagine the scene. Claire, terrified, holding the camcorder in that corner maybe, whispering into it as someone, Delaney, the caretaker, approached. The thought raised goosebumps on my neck. The room itself was mostly intact, probably untouched since Delaney died. It felt stuffy, the air tinged with a medicinal odour, like a hint of old antiseptic, perhaps from his illness. On a table near the armchair were orange pill bottles neatly arranged. Many were empty. I picked one up, a prescription for a strong painkiller, dated a year ago, prescribed to Charles Delaney, another for heart medication, a third for sleep aids. He'd been on a lot of drugs, maybe for cancer or some chronic disease. Beyond that, the room seemed ordinary, if old-fashioned. A plush rug underfoot, a bookcase with a few volumes that might have been personal favourites, classics mostly, Dickens, Conrad. However, one corner of the room caught my eye. A section of the floral wallpaper near the baseboard looked disturbed, discoloured. I knelt down for a closer look. Yes, a roughly rectangular segment of wallpaper, maybe 2 feet by 1 foot, had been peeled back and then reattached. The pattern didn't line up perfectly. I gently tugged at a loose corner, and the strip came away, revealing a small niche in the plaster wall. Inside that niche was a metal strongbox, about the size of a shoebox. My pulse quickened. A hidden compartment. This was exactly the kind of thing I'd hoped to find. It made sense that Delaney might hide something crucial away from prying eyes, something he wouldn't even trust estate sellers or family to see. My fingers itched to open the strongbox, but it had a combination lock built into it, an old rotary one with 3 digits. I doubted I'd guess it easily. I tried a few obvious ones, 000, 123, 111, just in case, but no luck. It didn't budge. I wondered if maybe a clue to the combination was nearby. People often use birthdays or significant dates. Delaney's birthday, perhaps. I remembered from the obituary. He was 76, but the exact date wasn't listed in what I read. Another possibility, if he had an obsession or a key person, some use a birth date of a child or spouse. Delaney had no kids, never married as far as I knew. Perhaps I could break it, but that might be noisy or damaging to whatever's inside. I decided to take the whole strongbox with me. The niche was snug, but I managed to wiggle the box out. It was surprisingly heavy, maybe 10 pounds, suggesting it held more than just papers. I wrapped it in my jacket to muffle any sound and carried it under my arm. As I stood up, I caught a sudden whiff, something like faint perfume, flowery but not rose, more like jasmine. It was out of place in this stale room. I paused and sniffed the air. The smell was fleeting. Perhaps I'd imagined it. But it made me feel like I wasn't alone for a split second. My eyes scanned the shadows, half expecting to see someone. Only the furniture and shadows greeted me. I realized I was holding my breath and let it out slowly. Time to go. I had what I came for, more than I expected, really. Clutching the hidden strongbox, I stepped back into the hallway and gently closed the door to the rose-wallpapered room behind me. I rehung the private sign for good measure. No need to advertise that it had been opened. Just as I turned to head back toward the stairs, I heard something that made my heart lurch. A soft thud, like a footstep on the floorboards, coming from downstairs. I froze, ears straining. The house was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, but after a moment, I heard another noise, a subtle scrape, as if someone had brushed against a piece of furniture. I quickly moved to the top of the stairs and peered down through the railing. From my vantage point, I could see the entryway and part of the living room. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Sunlight slanted through the half-open front door. Wait, open front door? My stomach clenched. I had closed the front door when I left yesterday, and as far as I knew, no one should be here today. But now it was open a few inches, swaying slightly as if recently disturbed. Then I saw him. A figure stepped into view in the foyer, looking around. Tall, gaunt, and unmistakable, the caretaker. In daylight, I could see him better than before. He wore the same dark coveralls, his head topped with thinning hair. His face was angular, with sallow skin stretched over high cheekbones. In his hand, glinting faintly, was a long wrench or crowbar. He must have used it to pry the door. I instinctively shrank back, adrenaline surging. My heart pounded so loudly I feared he'd hear it. The strongbox felt suddenly heavier in my arms, and I clutched it tighter against me to keep it from slipping. What was he doing here? Likely the same thing I was, looking for anything left behind. Maybe he realized the camcorder was sold and feared what was on the tape. Or he had come to retrieve whatever secrets Delaney left hidden, such as the box I now held. In any case, him being here spelled trouble for me. I needed to get out, but he stood between me and any obvious exit. The window I came through upstairs would be too slow to climb out of in a panic. The house's back door was closer, but I'd have to creep past the staircase and hope he was looking elsewhere. One creak of these floors, though, and I'd be exposed. Downstairs, the caretaker moved with a predatory caution, poking the crowbar at cushions, opening a closet, checking behind doors. He was searching, and judging by his deliberate movements, he had done this before. He might be systematically going through each room. I quietly retreated down the hallway, away from the stairs. My mind raced. Perhaps I could hide until he leaves. But if he finds the upstairs room open and the box gone, he'll know someone's been here and maybe search harder. And if he finds me, cornered in this old house with that crowbar in his hand, a bead of sweat trickled down my temple. I realized he'd likely make his way upstairs soon, since the ground floor looked mostly stripped. I had to either get out now or find a very good hiding spot, and I didn't want to leave empty-handed after finding this box. I crept into the first room on the hallway, the study I'd entered through. I gently reopened the window I came in by. It made a faint squeak, and I winced, pausing to listen. From the hall I heard the caretaker's footsteps, heavy and slow, moving toward the bottom of the stairs. I could potentially drop the box out first and then clamber out, but if he heard that thud outside, and could I carry the box while squeezing under the fence? Maybe I could toss it ahead of me. Risky, but maybe worth it. Before I could decide, a new sound echoed through the house. Crack! The whip-like report of wood splitting. It jolted me. I realized he must have forced open a locked drawer or door downstairs. The sudden noise galvanized me. He was distracted for the moment with his own destruction. This was my chance. I hoisted the heavy strongbox up to the windowsill and carefully eased it through, lowering it as far as I could before letting it drop into the bushes outside. It landed with a muffled rustle. Good. I then wriggled myself feet first out the window. My adrenaline had me moving faster than when I entered. I hung from the sill for a second and then released, dropping into the soft earth below. My ankles protested the impact, but held. Clutching my jacket and the strongbox, I crouched behind the rhododendrons, catching my breath. Above me, through the window I'd left open, I could faintly hear the caretaker's slow tread as he climbed the stairs, each step a creak. He was heading to the second floor, likely to the Rose Room or elsewhere. Now I just needed to get off the property unseen. I retraced my earlier path, keeping low and using the trees and hedges for cover. Every sense was on high alert. I heard the blood rushing in my ears, smelled the pungent crushed grass where I knelt, felt the dampness of the ground soaking through my pant legs. Each crack of a twig under my foot was an alarm in my brain, but I pushed on. At the back fence, I shoved the box through the gap first, then flattened myself and slithered out. It felt slower this time, my body not as pliable under stress, but I managed with only a minor tear to my shirt sleeve as sacrifice. I was out. I quickly retrieved the box and moved away from the fence into the neighbour's yard, using their hedge as cover. Only when I was halfway down the block, back on the sidewalk, did I finally exhale the breath I'd been holding. My hands were trembling, and I realised I'd cut my palm on something, probably the fence wire. A thin line of blood trickled, which I wiped on my jeans. I must have looked a sight, muddy, panting, carrying a dirty metal box with a death grip. I forced myself into a semblance of calm and strolled to my car as casually as possible. No shouts behind me, no one chasing. The caretaker likely had no idea I'd been there. He was too busy searching inside. With any luck, he might assume someone else had already taken the box during the sale, if he even discovered the niche. I had left the wallpaper hanging loose, though. He'd noticed that for sure. My only solace was that he still wouldn't know who had taken it, at least not immediately. I placed the strongbox on the passenger seat and threw a blanket over it in case anyone looked into the car. Then I eased the car away from the curb. As I rounded the corner, I caught one last glimpse of the Delaney house's roof poking above the trees, like a slumbering giant unaware that I had just plundered one of its secrets. My heart still hammered all the way back to my apartment. I couldn't stop replaying the moment I saw the caretaker and the tense escape. It was only when I was safely back inside my own four walls, door triple locked behind me, that I allowed myself a moment to slump against the wall and just breathe. That was too close. Far too close. My skin was clammy, and I realised I was soaked in sweat beneath my jacket. I tossed it aside and then regarded the prize I'd risked everything for, the strongbox. It sat on my small kitchen table innocently, as if waiting to be opened. I sat down in front of it, wiping my face with a dish towel and taking a gulp of water from the tap to steady myself. The box was scuffed metal, olive green like an old army locker, with a combination dial on the front. "Well, let's see what was worth hiding, Mr. Delaney," I murmured to myself. My voice sounded shaky in the quiet apartment. I tried to recall any significant number that might crack it. The obituary hadn't listed a birth date in the snippet. Maybe an anniversary of something? Or a code like 777? Randomly trying might take forever. Instead, I examined the box closely. Sometimes people who have trouble remembering combos write them down or use easy sequences. I rotated the dial, listening for subtle clicks, a trick some old safes allow, though this one was small and not high security. I did notice something. Faintly etched on the bottom of the box were 3 numbers, maybe scratched by a penknife. 2 to 85. It could be a red herring or unrelated graffiti, but it was worth a shot. I spun the dial right, stopping at 2, then left past 2 to 8, then right to 5, 2 and 85 being the combination, typically. With a soft metallic clunk, the lock yielded and the lid cracked open. A rush of triumph filled me, followed by apprehension. I slowly lifted the lid the rest of the way. Inside were several items, neatly arranged. A bundle of letters tied with twine, a small leather-bound notebook, what looked like a USB flash drive, and a couple of photographs. Resting atop everything was something unexpected and chilling, a thin silver necklace with a little pendant in the shape of a hummingbird. It looked familiar. In one of the articles, Claire's sister had described her missing pendant, a keepsake Claire wore every day, a hummingbird given by their mother. My throat constricted. This was Claire's necklace. There was a dark stain on the chain. I dared not think it might be blood, old and dried. I set it aside gently, hands shaking at the thought of Delaney keeping this trophy hidden. Swallowing hard, I took out the photographs. The first was of Charles Delaney himself, much younger, perhaps in his 40s, standing proudly in front of the very house, shaking hands with another man I didn't recognize. It looked like a celebratory day, maybe when he bought the place or a business deal. The second photograph, however, made me gasp softly. It was Claire. A candid shot of her walking on a sidewalk, not looking at the camera. She looked carefree, unaware she was being photographed. It was the kind of stalker photo that makes your skin crawl, dated by the print timestamp to 3 weeks before she disappeared. I felt anger boiling up. Delaney must have been surveilling her, planning whatever he did. The idea that this respected old man had likely hunted this woman made my stomach turn. I carefully set the photos aside and picked up the bundle of letters. The paper on top was not an old letter, but a more recent document, a last will and testament, perhaps? No, it was a letter addressed to my nephew Andrew, dated a month ago, which would be shortly before Delaney's death. I unfolded it and began to read. Dear Andrew, if you are reading this, then I have passed on. There are things about me you do not know, things I am ashamed of, and some I fear. I have made errors in judgment, terrible ones, and they have led to tragedy. I pray you never find this letter, but if you do, know that I never meant to bring danger to our family name. It went on, somewhat incoherently, shifting between apology and warning. It mentioned a girl I wronged years ago, and the man who helped me, who now watches me with those hungry eyes. My pulse quickened at that line. That had to be the caretaker. Delaney seemed to fear him, calling him a devil I bargained with. There was reference to the demon in the walls, which might have been metaphorical, or the ramblings of a dying mind, and a final plea, burn this strongbox and its contents, Andrew. The past must turn to ash. I am too weak to do what I should. I hear her at night, the girl. I see her eyes. May God forgive me. I set the letter down, hands trembling. The old man had confessed, in a way, but also tried to cover it all up even in death. If the nephew ever found this, he likely would have destroyed it as asked. But the estate sale must have happened before anyone discovered the niche, or the nephew didn't even bother to check that room. The other letters in the bundle were older, one appearing to be from an attorney concerning some hush-money trust, likely to keep someone silent, though the names were vague. Another was a letter from what looked like a mental health clinic, referencing Delaney's declining mental state. It wasn't immediately clear how it fit, but one line read, "We assure you that auditory hallucinations are common in late stage. The patient's guilt and trauma manifest as voices. We recommend." So he was hearing things. Possibly Claire's voice as his guilt ate at him. I next picked up the leather-bound notebook. It appeared to be a personal diary. Flipping through, I saw entries spanning years, though not daily, just sporadic notes. Many were mundane or illegible scrawls about his health and business, but towards the back my eye caught an entry dated 5 years ago, around when Claire vanished. July 17. I did it. God help me, I brought her here. Her eyes, I told her she will be safe if she keeps quiet. F handled the unpleasantness. I cannot write it. She's still alive, but for how long? I cannot sleep. I hear her crying even when she's silent. My breath hitched as I read those words again. She's still alive, but for how long? That implied Claire was kept alive for at least some time after being taken. Another entry, undated but likely later. The pills help dull the voice. F says it's all in my head, that she's gone no better. There is a debt to be paid. In the cellar, I feel her presence, waiting. Cellar? My mind flashed. Was Claire killed and buried in the cellar of that house? The police would no doubt search the property thoroughly now, but if I could direct them. Perhaps his diary held the location of her remains. I continued scanning quickly. F grew too eager. He enjoyed it. I had to pay him more to keep quiet, to stay away for a time. But he always comes back, looking at me with those eyes that know. He is the devil at my shoulder. So the caretaker, initial F, maybe frank, was not just an unwitting helper. He was a willing participant, possibly even the primary killer. Delaney might have initiated the crime, but F enjoyed it. My mouth went dry. I thought of that gaunt man's face. There had been a cold emptiness in it, a predator's detachment. The final entry was heartbreaking in its brevity. I see her in every shadow. I am already damned. No clear admission of where Claire's body was, but heavy implication she was killed, gone now, as F says, possibly in the cellar as he mentioned feeling her presence there. Then I remembered the USB flash drive. I picked it up. There was a piece of masking tape on it with a label, CW footage. CW. Claire Holloway? Or maybe something else. But likely Claire's initials reversed, or an abbreviation. If it contained footage, perhaps that was a digital copy or other recordings from the camcorder. Maybe Delaney had transferred some video to his computer. I quickly fetched my laptop and plugged the USB in, my heart pounding anew. It took a moment for the drive to be recognized, and indeed it held a single video file and a text document. The text file was named README. I opened it first. It read, "Couldn't destroy this. Too weak. Not right to keep either. Maybe God will guide. CD." The video file was labelled with a date, 5 years ago. I double-clicked it. A media player opened and grainy footage began to play. It seemed to be from the same camera, but a different time than the message I saw. The timestamp indicated 2 days after Claire had gone missing. The video showed a larger view of a basement or cellar room, lit by a single dangling bulb. The camera must have been placed on a shelf or tripod. In frame was Claire, bound to a chair, hands tied behind her, mouth gagged with a strip of cloth. My stomach lurched at the sight. She was alive, eyes red from crying. Standing next to her, partially turned away from the camera, as if not realizing it was recording, was Charles Delaney. He looked dishevelled, not the composed gentleman from society pages. His hair was a mess, face drawn, and he was wringing his hands. He was talking, mostly to himself, but some to her, though the audio was muffled. I turned the volume up. The speakers hissed, but I could make out some of it. "Didn't want this. You weren't supposed to be hurt." Claire was whimpering behind the gag. Then another figure walked into frame, and I stiffened. It was the caretaker, younger but unmistakable in stature and gauntness. He wasn't wearing the coveralls, just dark clothes. He said something like, "Nobody will find her. You worry too much. Let me," and then the audio got harder to decipher as Claire's muffled cries grew. Delaney stepped back, shaking his head. The caretaker, F, I'll call him, approached Claire and roughly tilted her head up by her hair. She screamed behind the gag, tears streaming. I wanted to stop watching, but I forced myself. This was evidence, and somehow Delaney had recorded it possibly without F's knowledge. Why? To document his crime? Or some twisted need to confess later? Or maybe F recorded it to relive it. Hard to tell, but given the hidden nature, likely Delaney set it up. On the video, Delaney was pacing in the background, looking agitated. F leaned down and said something softly near Claire's ear. Her eyes widened in terror and she started thrashing, what looked like pleading through her gag. F then turned to Delaney and said coldly, clearly audible now, "We have to finish this. If you can't, I will. She knows your name, your house, everything. You want to go to jail, old man?" Delaney held his head in his hands. "I can't think. This wasn't the plan. I just wanted." He trailed off. F sighed almost in annoyance and pulled out a long object from his belt, a knife. My breath caught. Claire's struggles became frantic, the chair scraping the floor. F turned back to her and Delaney suddenly lunged forward. "Wait, not yet, please." He moved to the camera then, perhaps noticing it was on, or maybe to stop F. The video abruptly ended there. I sat back, hand over my mouth. My eyes were damp, and I realized I had been crying silently. The horror of what I'd witnessed, even if it cut off, I could imagine what followed. Claire likely didn't leave that basement alive. But this video was a smoking gun, evidence of kidnapping, conspiracy, and presumably murder. Even if Delaney was dead, F was clearly still alive, and he was the one who actually seemed eager to kill. This video could put him away, if not for murder, if we find no body, but at least for kidnapping and attempted murder, etc. And if Claire's remains could be found, then murder charges for sure. I understood now why Delaney couldn't destroy it, but also couldn't face it. He left it to fate with that note, perhaps hoping someone would find it after his death and do what he couldn't. I quickly backed up the file to my laptop, then ejected the USB. I also snapped photos of the letters and diary pages on my phone for good measure, in case anything happened to the originals. My hands were shaking with a mixture of triumph and trauma. I had everything needed to blow this case wide open. Evidence that not only was Claire taken by Delaney, but that his caretaker, likely named Frank or Frederick or something with F, was complicit and likely her murderer. My immediate impulse was to call Marcus right away, get him over here to hand all this over, and I would. Very soon. But I also felt that creeping sense of being watched again. The caretaker had been at the house. If he suspected someone got there before him, he might start thinking of who. Could he trace the camcorder sale to me? The estate sale lady might recall the buyer if asked. And if he finds out my name or address, I was suddenly very aware that I might not be safe here. I glanced at my door lock and windows. The daylight outside was already dimming. Evening was approaching faster than I realized. Long shadows cast by the buildings stretched across the streets. Raven City's nights could be unforgiving. I grabbed my phone to call Marcus. That's when it buzzed in my hand, startling me enough I nearly dropped it. An incoming call, unknown number but local. "Hello," I answered warily. At first I heard nothing, just a faint background sound, like someone was calling from a moving car, engine noise, maybe music. Then a voice came through, low and raspy. "You should mind your own business, Mr. Bennett." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "You know who?" The voice was barely above a whisper, but I recognized a hint of it, from the video maybe, or our brief exchange at the estate sale. It was him, F. My mouth went dry. How did he get my number? Perhaps from a phone book or online listing after getting my name from the estate records. My mind raced. "If you think you can play detective, you're mistaken," the voice continued. "Leave the past alone, or you'll end up just like that girl." My hand tightened on the phone. "Are you threatening me?" It was a stupid question. The threat was explicit. I just needed to stall, think. Should I try to get him to talk while tracing the call somehow? Not much I could do on my own. "You've been poking where you shouldn't. I know what you did today." His tone had an edge of anger now. "Last warning. Drop it. Because if I have to come for you, I won't be as gentle as old Charlie." There was a click as the call ended, leaving me in stunned silence. My heart was thumping so loudly I could hear it in my ears. He knew my name, possibly where I lived, and clearly that I'd taken something from the house. What you did today. I had no more time to waste. I immediately dialed Marcus. It rang a few times and went to voicemail. I cursed and called again, and again no answer. He might be in a meeting or dealing with something. I left him a terse voicemail. "Marcus, it's Jack. I found major evidence and I'm in danger. The caretaker just called and threatened me. I need help. I'm heading out of my apartment because I think he knows where I am. Call me as soon as you get this. I'll update you when I can." I decided to also text Julia Holloway. Marcus had mentioned meeting her soon, but maybe he hadn't yet. I'd found her contact through one of the social media pages earlier when searching Claire's info, though I hadn't reached out. It might be a shot in the dark, but she deserved to know something was happening, and perhaps she might have useful info or at least be on guard. I quickly typed, "Hi, Julia. I'm Jack Bennett, a journalist who has been investigating your sister's case. We haven't met, but I have urgent information about Claire. It's too much to explain by text. Are you available to meet or call? It's important." I sent it with some trepidation. She might ignore a random message, or it might upset her. But given her persistence in the case, maybe not. Now I had to move. The smart thing would be to go to a public place or straight to the police station with the evidence. But if the caretaker was possibly en route here, I didn't want to bump into him in the hallway or street alone. I gathered everything, the strongbox items, the notebook, letters, USB, necklace, photos, stuffed them into my messenger bag. I also grabbed my small snub-nose revolver from the drawer under my bed. I'm not a fan of guns, but I kept one after some hairy assignments years back, and thankfully had a permit. I checked it, loaded, safety off, then concealed it in the inner pocket of my coat. Before leaving, I took a last look at the apartment to ensure I left nothing crucial. My heart was racing, but my mind felt oddly clear, focused. Time to go. I eased out of my apartment door carefully and headed down the stairs. The hall was quiet, but I peeked around every corner, senses hyper-alert. No sign of anyone suspicious. Reaching the ground floor, I slipped out the front entrance onto the street. Dusk had settled and the streetlights flickered on. A light fog was creeping in from the bay, softening the edges of buildings and cars. I moved quickly to my car, parked just down the block. As I approached it, I scanned around. No obvious stalkers or unfamiliar vehicles. Maybe I was lucky and he hadn't reached here yet. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text. Glancing quickly while keeping one eye on the road, I saw it was from Julia. "I'm here." "What info? Police said they had something new. Are you with them?" So Marcus or someone had possibly contacted her, or maybe she means I'm the something new? Hard to decipher. I decided to call her instead of texting while driving. She answered almost immediately. "Hello. Who is this really?" Her voice was tense, defensive. "Julia, hi. It's Jack Bennett. Why are you texting me about my sister? Do you know something? Detective Hayes said he was going to meet me tomorrow about a new lead." She was speaking fast, emotions barely in check. "Julia, I'm working with Detective Hayes. Yes, I'm the one who found the new lead. It's a video of Claire from around the time she disappeared." I decided there was no point in being gentle with half-truths. She deserved honesty. "I have evidence that Charles Delaney, the man who owned the house where she was found, and his caretaker were involved in what happened." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. "Found? You mean you found where she was? Is she alive?" That last word broke a bit, as if she dared to hope. My throat tightened. "I'm sorry, I haven't found her alive. From everything I've uncovered, it appears she didn't make it." I heard her stifle a sob. This was gut-wrenching, doing it over the phone, but I had no choice. "Julia, I wouldn't reach out like this, but I'm in a bit of danger myself now from the man who hurt her. I have proof of what he did, and he knows it. I'm heading to the police, but if you want, I think you should be there too when this all comes down. For Claire. Detective Hayes will corroborate everything when he calls you, but I couldn't wait. I'm sorry to drop this on you so suddenly." There was a long silence. I could hear her uneven breathing, trying to regain composure. Finally she spoke, voice resolute despite the tremble. "Where do you want to meet?" I considered that. "I'm driving to the Raven City Police HQ downtown, but if that man is after me, I don't want to lead him straight there if I can help it. Maybe I should go somewhere public first, ensure I'm not being tailed, then head over. Come to Viceroy Cafe. Do you know it? It's on 8th and Linden. It's busy and near the station anyway," she suggested. "I know it. All right, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I have short brown hair, leather jacket." I realized I didn't actually know what she looked like now, but I recalled an old photo. She had lighter brown hair than Claire, maybe. "I know what you look like, Mr. Bennett. I looked you up when Detective Hayes mentioned someone found evidence," she said, surprising me. "I'll see you there." She hung up. I managed a wry smile. Smart woman. In a different context, I'd be impressed at her quick due diligence. Right now, I was mostly just anxious to safely connect and then hand everything to the cops. I took a meandering route to make sure I wasn't followed, doubling back through a roundabout path, checking my mirrors often. The fog and twilight made it harder to tell, but I didn't notice any one car sticking with me. The city's neon signs and headlights were blurring with the mist, giving everything a noir, dreamlike sheen as I navigated to the cafe. The Viceroy Cafe was buzzing when I arrived. The warm yellow light and chatter inside spilled out every time the door opened. I parked across the street. Before getting out, I took a long look around. No obvious threat. Still, I kept my guard as I walked over. Inside, the rich scent of coffee and baked goods washed over me, so at odds with the dread and adrenaline churning in my gut. I spotted Julia immediately, sitting at a small table near the back, under a framed poster of some old film. She looked mid-20s, with wavy chestnut hair pulled back in a ponytail, a determined but anxious expression on her face. She wore a denim jacket and had a scarf fidgeted between her fingers. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd likely been crying, or maybe she just had a long day, but given our call, I guessed the former. I approached and gave a gentle wave. "Julia?" She stood up. "Jack?" Her eyes searched mine, and whatever she saw seemed to confirm I was who I said. Without warning, she threw her arms around me in a brief, tight hug. It took me by surprise, but I patted her back awkwardly. She pulled away just as fast, blushing and wiping her eyes. "Sorry, thank you. For not giving up, for finding something." Her gratitude was overwhelming and undeserved. She barely knew me. I haven't solved it alone or anything. I just stumbled onto the tape. Detective Hayes has been key. We sat, and I kept my bag on my lap protectively. We spoke in low voices. I filled her in on what had happened, in a careful but honest summary. Finding the tape, confirming it was Claire, Delaney's involvement, the caretaker threat, and the evidence I discovered in the house. Julia's face went through a myriad of emotions. Horror, anger, sadness. Tears slipped down when I confirmed Claire's death likely happened in that house. Her hands clenched when I mentioned the caretaker possibly being the killer. But she remained composed enough to ask sharp questions. Did I have the evidence with me? Yes, all in the bag. Did the police have a copy of the first tape? Yes. Could this caretaker be tracked down? Likely, once we give his name from the letters, should be Frank or something. As I quietly showed her Claire's hummingbird necklace from the strongbox, Julia let out a soft cry, taking it from my palm and holding it to her chest. This was hers. I gave it to her for her birthday. That small confirmation was enough to make her believe everything fully if she had any doubts. Suddenly, her expression hardened. That man? F. He's still out there. He hurt her, killed her, and now he's threatening you? We can't let him slip away. We won't, I assured. Marcus, Detective Hayes will likely get a warrant for him once we hand this over. But we should be careful. He might even show up here for all I know. At that moment, the door chime jingled as someone entered the cafe, and I instinctively glanced over, half expecting to see the gaunt face of F. Instead, I saw Detective Hayes rushing in, scanning the room. I raised a hand and he jogged over to our table. "Jack, thank God," Marcus said, slightly out of breath. "I got your messages. Are you all right?" His eyes moved to Julia. "Miss Holloway, I presume? I'm Detective Hayes. Sorry we meet under such circumstances." Julia nodded. "Thanks for coming. Jack said you were helping." Marcus took a seat, exhaling with relief at finding me unharmed. "I went by your apartment first, saw your car was gone. Gave me a scare. I was worried he might have gotten to you. He tried calling to scare me off. I wasn't going to wait around," I said. "We've got him, Marcus. Or at least, we've got the evidence to nail him." I tapped my bag. His eyebrows lifted. "Really?" I quietly slid the bag open enough for him to peek at the contents. I explained quickly and succinctly what I found. The diary, the letter, the USB with the video of the basement scene, the necklace, etc. Marcus looked astonished and impressed, but also a bit exasperated. "You went back to the house alone and found all this? Damn it, Jack, I told you to be careful. You're lucky you didn't get killed, but I'm glad you did." He shook his head with a half-smile of disbelief. Julia added quietly, "We have to go after him, right now, before he knows we have all this." Marcus nodded, already taking his phone out. "We will. I'll call this in to my captain and get an arrest team for the caretaker. What's his name, by the way?" I opened the letter to Andrew and pointed to a line where Delaney wrote the initial. "He only calls him F, but maybe the estate records or nephew can give his name. He was a long-time caretaker or groundskeeper." Marcus's face darkened. "Frederick Klein. That's his name. We got it from the nephew this afternoon, and the nephew said Fred was oddly MIA since the funeral. We were going to bring him in for a chat first thing tomorrow. Looks like he saved us the trouble by turning up at the house." "Klein," I repeated, letting the name imprint. The name felt incongruously ordinary for a monster. Marcus dialed and relayed rapidly to his captain. The urgent need to pick up Frederick Klein, armed and dangerous, suspect in Holloway case, possibly heading for Jack's apartment, or who knows where. He requested units to sweep around my place and the Delaney house. He also requested a forensic team at the Delaney estate to search especially the cellar for remains, mentioning likely burial site. "And send a couple uniforms to Viceroy Cafe to escort us and the evidence back securely," he added, glancing at Julia and me. After hanging up, he sighed, "They're on it. We should get to the station soon, but better to wait here for backup in case Freddy boy tries something." Julia was holding the necklace tightly. "He might run now if he suspects the police are coming." "He might," Marcus agreed grimly. "But he made a mistake calling because now we're on high alert. If he runs, we'll put out a citywide bolo. He won't get far." We lapsed into a momentary silence. I sipped some lukewarm coffee Julia had ordered but not touched. Now, my nerves were still humming, but I felt safer with Marcus here and knowing cops were mobilizing. Julia stared at the necklace, lost in memory, perhaps. Marcus broke the silence softly. "Julia, I promise you, we will get him, and we'll find Claire. One way or another, you'll have her back." Julia closed her eyes, a tear escaping. She nodded. "That's all I want, that and for them to pay for what they did to her." I found myself promising too, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "We'll make sure of it." Outside, sirens wailed, multiple. We exchanged looks, wondering if that was for something else or related. Marcus's phone buzzed, and he answered curtly. After a few "yes, sir" replies, he ended the call and looked at us with a fierce satisfaction. They got him. I felt a huge weight lift. "Already?" Marcus grinned tightly. Uniforms spotted a man matching his description near Jack's building, probably staking it out. They approached and he took off, led them on a foot chase through a couple alleys. He pulled a weapon, wrench or crowbar on an officer, but got tased for his trouble. He's in custody. Julia let out a breath, covering her mouth. Whether it was relief or the emotional toll hitting, she began to quietly cry. I put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He can't hurt anyone now." Marcus added, "They'll bring him in, and with this mountain of evidence, he's finished. We'll likely get a confession too, but even if not, it's airtight." His eyes had a steely sheen. I almost wish he'd resisted more, but it's better this way. I nodded. Part of me had fancied some dramatic confrontation, but honestly, hearing he was caught swiftly with no one seriously hurt was a relief. The monster was caged without further bloodshed. 2 uniformed officers entered the cafe and made their way to us. "Detective Hayes, we're here to escort you." Marcus flashed his badge and introduced Julia and me. "We'll head to the station now." He looked at our table, at us. "Ready?" Julia stood, straightening her back. Her tears were wiped, face resolved. "Yes, more than ever." I picked up my bag, ensuring everything was secure. The 3 of us left the cafe, flanked by the officers. Night had fully fallen, and the mist turned the streetlights into glowing orbs. As we walked to the waiting patrol cars, I felt an odd mixture of exhaustion and elation. It was nearly over. I caught myself glancing around one last time, expecting perhaps the ghost of Claire to be watching, or the spectre of Delaney in the fog. But I saw nothing except the city night, and heard only the sounds of traffic and distant foghorns. Still, in my mind, I imagined Claire's voice, not in fear this time, but in gratitude, whispering on the wind. "Thank you," I fancied it said. I closed my eyes for a moment as I opened the car door for Julia and then got in after. "We're going to get you justice," I answered in my thoughts. And perhaps, in doing so, we all might find some peace. Even inside the brightly lit police station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. A shiver crawled up my spine as I sat in the quiet corridor, waiting for Detective Hayes to finish reviewing the evidence. Julia Holloway sat beside me, arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes darting at every shadow that shifted on the walls. We should have felt safe here, surrounded by armed officers and thick concrete walls. Yet an unspoken dread coiled in the pit of my stomach. We had turned over everything to the police. The damning video from Charles Delaney's basement, the letters spattered with cryptic stains, and the bundle of old photographs that tied Delaney and his caretaker, Frederick Klein, to Claire Holloway's disappearance. Finally, Claire's story was out in the open, laid bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. But as the minutes ticked by in uneasy silence, I realized that exposing the truth had done little to calm my nerves. If anything, each new revelation only sharpened my paranoia. It felt as if unseen eyes were tracking our every move, even here in the supposed safety of the station. A faint thud echoed from down the hallway, and both Julia and I jolted. She shot me a glance. Her face was pale, her breath shallow. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, listening hard. Footsteps approached, just a weary officer making his rounds, but for a split second I'd expected something, someone else. My mind conjured the image of Klein's cold gaze or worse, Claire's phantom silhouette, lurking just beyond sight. I clenched my fists to steady myself. This was the toll of what we had uncovered. Now we were the ones haunted. Detective Marcus Hayes eventually emerged from his office, a thick manila file in hand. He looked as tired as we felt. Deep lines etched his dark skin, and his eyes were grave behind his glasses. "You two holding up?" he asked softly. Julia managed a terse nod. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stood, legs stiff. The detective motioned for us to follow him to a more private room off the main hallway. Inside, Hayes shut the door carefully. The hum of the station faded, leaving only the tick of a clock overhead. He spread out a series of photographs on the table. I recognized some. The stone steps leading down into Delaney's basement, the iron rings bolted into the walls, a splash of dried blood on concrete. New ones depicted something I hadn't seen earlier, a hidden alcove behind a false wall, revealed now in the harsh glare of a camera flash. My stomach churned at the sight. Inside that secret room were shackles, dark stains, and what looked like small personal effects scattered across a wooden workbench. "After we got your evidence, we secured a warrant and searched the entire Delaney property," Hayes explained. His voice was low and controlled, but I caught an undercurrent of anger. "We found a concealed room in the basement, behind a bookshelf. It appears Claire wasn't the only one." He pointed to one photo of a tarnished silver locket. "We believe this belonged to a woman who went missing about 2 years ago. Her name was Emily Ross." He then tapped a photo of a cracked leather journal open to pages filled with dates and initials. This journal lists details. "We think Klein kept records of the victims, possibly 5, maybe more, over the last decade." Julia gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the evidence. "Oh my God, there were others?" Her voice trembled with rage and sorrow. I placed a comforting hand on her back, though I felt equally ill. The revelation turned my insides to ice. 5 victims, 5 lives snuffed out in the dark, Claire among them. A heavy silence settled over us as the horrific scope of Delaney and Klein's crimes sank in. It wasn't just Claire. There had been a pattern of disappearances, girls who vanished without a trace, young women whose names were now scrawled in Klein's ledger, all of them lost to the hidden horrors of that house. "The forensic team is still identifying the remains we found," Hayes continued quietly. "There were partial remains of at least 2 people in that chamber. We suspect one is Claire." Julia let out a strangled sob at that, and I gently pulled her into a sideways embrace as she shuddered. Detective Hayes paused, choosing his words carefully. "We'll run DNA tests to be certain, but based on the necklace found with one of the bodies, it matches the description of the one Claire always wore." A bitter mix of grief and resolve washed over Julia's face, the agony of confirmation, but also the end of uncertainty. Claire had been found, at least in some form. I felt light-headed, anger and sadness twisting inside me. Claire's fate was no longer a mystery, but the truth was far more terrible than anything we'd imagined. And those other victims, strangers to me, yet now bound to Claire's story, cried out for justice too. The air in the small room felt colder suddenly. My skin prickled as if a draught had blown through, though none was there. I thought I heard, for the briefest moment, a whisper at the edge of hearing, a woman's voice sighing. When I glanced over my shoulder, there was only the closed door and an empty hall beyond. Was it just my mind playing tricks or something else? I bit down on my unease. This was no time to lose my grip on reality. "We have more than enough to charge Frederick Klein," Hayes said, drawing our attention back. He gathered the photos and evidence back into the file with a determined air. "He's in custody now, and we're about to begin the interrogation. If you're up for it, you can watch from behind the one-way mirror. Sometimes it helps to hear it firsthand." He looked at Julia especially, acknowledging her need for answers. Julia wiped her eyes and straightened, a steely resolve hardening her features beneath the grief. "I want to see him," she said quietly. "I want to hear him admit what he did to my sister." A few minutes later, we stood in a small, dim observation room facing a large one-way mirror. On the other side of the glass was the interrogation room. Harsh light bathed the tiny chamber beyond, illuminating Frederick Klein seated at a metal table. My heart lurched at the sight of him. The last time I'd seen Klein, he'd been fleeing into the woods behind the Delaney estate before the police caught him. Now his wrists were cuffed to a metal loop on the table. Even so, he sat with an eerie calm. His thinning grey hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean prison-issue jumpsuit as if it were a pressed suit at a dinner party. There was a faint smile on his lips, utterly out of place. Detective Hayes entered the interrogation room. followed by another officer who stood guard by the door. Through a small speaker in our observation room, we could hear everything in the next room. My pulse drummed in my ears as I watched Hayes drop the manila case file onto the table in front of Klein. Klein didn't flinch. His eyes followed the detective with a chilling, almost amused interest. When he glanced toward the mirror, directly toward us, I instinctively stepped back. It was as if he could sense our presence behind the glass. Hayes remained standing, hands flat on the table. "Frederick Klein," he began, voice echoing slightly through the speaker, "we have a lot to discuss." Klein tilted his head, that thin smile still pinned in place. "I've already told your officers the basics," he said calmly. His voice was soft, almost courteous, but carried a razor edge. "I was Mr. Delaney's caretaker. I looked after the house and after him in his final days. Anything else you think I've done, you're mistaken." A flare of anger tightened my chest at the audacity of his denial. Julia tensed beside me. I saw her hands ball into fists at her sides. Hayes pulled out a photograph from the file, a still frame from the video we'd found, and slid it across the table toward Klein. Even from behind the glass, I recognized it. A blurred shot of Klein's face looming over a terrified Claire, who was bound to a chair. In the image, his eyes were wild in the green glow of night vision, his mouth open in what looked like a snarl. "You drugged and kidnapped Claire Holloway," Hayes said evenly, tapping the photo with 2 fingers. "We have it on video. You helped Charles Delaney torture her." His tone grew harsher. "We found the hidden room, Klein. We found what's left of Claire and of others." For a moment, something flickered across Klein's face. An eye twitched, the faintest tightening of his jaw. Then he let out a slow breath through his nose. He regarded the photo with a detached curiosity, as if it were an abstract painting rather than evidence of his atrocities. "Charles was a very sick man, Detective," he replied. His tone remained smooth, almost conversational, as if discussing someone else's misdeeds. "I did what I had to do to take care of him. Sometimes that meant disposing of unpleasant things." He tapped the photograph lightly without really looking at it. I won't deny cleaning up his messes, but everything I did was at his instruction. The girl Claire, she was his obsession, not mine. Julia's lip trembled with anger, and she stepped closer to the glass, her breath fogging it faintly. I gently touched her arm, a silent reminder to stay calm, though my own hands were shaking. Hayes leaned forward, knuckles white on the metal table. "So you're claiming you were just an unwilling helper?" he challenged, voice dripping with skepticism. "That's not what this says." He pulled out Klein's leather-bound journal and flipped it open between them. "This diary of yours details each victim, dates, methods, even notes about their lessons." Klein's smile faltered. A flash of irritation crossed his eyes. "He always kept notes," Klein muttered almost to himself. "He liked to document the progress." Hayes cut in sharply. "The progress of what exactly? What were you two doing to these women?" For a heartbeat, Klein was silent. Then a dark, prideful gleam lit in his eyes. "Opening their eyes," he said, his voice almost reverent. "Charles believed those girls were ungrateful, blind to the gift of life. He wanted to teach them, break them down so they'd appreciate it properly." His words sent a chill through me. Julia stifled a gasp of disgust. Klein went on, his tone wistful and twisted. "It was never about killing, Detective. Not at first. It was about enlightenment. Charles was an artist in that regard." I felt bile rise in my throat at the depravity and delusion in Klein's words. Through the mirror, I saw Detective Hayes clench his jaw to keep his composure. "Enlightenment," Hayes repeated, voice full of contempt. "Is that what you call what happened to Emily Ross? To Claire Holloway? To all those other young women who vanished?" Klein closed his eyes and shrugged, an infuriatingly casual gesture. "Call it what you will." He then opened his eyes and turned his gaze directly to the one-way mirror. My heart stuttered. I could have sworn he was looking straight at us. His lips curved into that faint smile again. "You have me now. Charles is dead. Isn't that enough for you?" he said softly. "You should drop this. Forget the rest." Hayes frowned and exchanged a quick, puzzled glance with the officer by the door. "What do you mean, the rest?" he pressed. A dry chuckle escaped Klein's throat. "Do you really think it ends with me? With Charles?" He leaned forward as far as the cuffs allowed, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. There are some horrors that won't stay buried, Detective. Some shadows run deeper than any cellar. A prickling unease crept over my skin at his words. Behind me, I heard Julia suck in a breath. Hayes narrowed his eyes, studying Klein's face. If you know something, you'd better say it plainly. Who else was involved? For a long moment, Klein stayed silent, his gaze growing distant. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lamp in the ceiling. Just when I thought he might refuse to answer, he spoke, voice barely above a murmur. Charles always said we were doing God's work, he said, staring past Hayes at the wall. He wasn't acting alone. There was someone he used to speak with in secret, a benefactor of sorts. Klein's eyes slid back to Hayes, enjoying the alarm that flashed across the detective's face. I never learned his name. I only heard the whispers on late-night calls, a voice on the phone from somewhere far away. Charles would listen like an obedient son. A thin smile returned to Klein's lips. He was following orders, Detective. Hayes looked stunned for a half-second, then masked it. Are you saying another person orchestrated these crimes? He asked, incredulous and angry. Who is this benefactor? Give me a name. I told you I don't have a name, Klein said with a sigh. The voice never gave one, but it promised Charles immortality, recognition, all for completing the work that you've now interrupted. He shrugged, chains clinking against the steel table. Believe that or don't, it doesn't matter now. Klein paused, tilting his head as if listening to something in the room only he could hear. Then his expression split into a ghastly grin. He'll be very disappointed in me, of course, for getting caught. Klein's voice dropped to a chilling hush. Perhaps he'll even come to tie off all the loose ends. His gaze flickered to the mirror as he spoke, and my blood ran cold. Julia gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. I realized I was trembling. Loose ends. The phrase echoed in my mind with dire implication. Hayes straightened, visibly disturbed. If you're trying to scare us, it won't work, he growled, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. Suddenly, Klein let out a rasping sound that made Hayes stop. A quiver ran through Klein's shoulders. It took me a moment to realize he was laughing. The sound that came through the speaker was a broken, wheezing chuckle, the laugh of a man who truly had nothing left to lose. When he finally looked up again, there were tears in his eyes from the force of it. You're already scared, he said, almost compassionately. Then his face hardened and he bared his teeth. Do what you like with me. It won't stop him, he snarled. You think you're safe in your pretty little station? You think putting me in a cell will protect you? He leaned as close as he could to Detective Hayes and whispered, He's already here. Watching, marking you. My heart thundered against my ribcage. Hayes recoiled a half step, glancing instinctively over his shoulder. In that instant, the overhead light flickered. Once, twice, the buzz of electricity whining. The room dimmed, plunging the space into momentary darkness. In that stutter of failing light, I glimpsed a pale outline just behind Detective Hayes's shoulder, a slender figure with long, dark hair. My breath caught. For an instant, I swore I saw Claire standing there, her eyes fixed on Frederick Klein. A blink later, the fluorescent lamp hummed back to life, and the figure was gone, as if it had never been. As the light steadied once more, Hayes recovered and slammed his palm on the table. "Tell me who he is, Klein," he demanded. "Who's watching us? Give me a name." Klein merely leaned back and closed his eyes, suddenly looking very tired. A faint smile lingered on his lips. "We're done here," he sighed. Detective Hayes rapped on the door twice, signalling the guard to escort Klein back to his cell. As the officer moved to yank the cuffed man to his feet, Klein opened his eyes and looked at the mirror one final time. His lips moved in a soundless whisper. I couldn't hear it, but I could swear I saw the word watching. Then he was dragged out of the room, the heavy door clanging shut behind him. We stepped back as Hayes entered the observation room, where we stood. The anger in his eyes cooled when he saw Julia's tear-streaked face and my ashen pallor. "Are you both all right?" he asked gently. Julia wiped her cheeks, nodding even though she was clearly far from all right. I realized I was still clutching her hand and forced myself to let go. He implied someone else was involved," I said under my breath. My voice wavered. "Do you think that's true?" Hayes traded a grim look with us. "I honestly don't know," he admitted. "It could be a desperate bluff or the ramblings of a madman. But if there is someone else, He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The three of us stood in heavy silence for a moment, the weight of Klein's parting threats hanging in the air. Finally, Hayes cleared his throat. He tried for a reassuring smile, though it looked strained. "We'll keep digging, I promise. My team will comb through Delaney's contacts, phone records, anything that might hint at a partner or benefactor. In the meantime, I'm assigning an officer to watch your house, Julia, and one for you as well," he added, nodding to me, "just as a precaution." Julia opened her mouth, ready to protest the notion that she needed protection, but then she closed it and merely bobbed her head. We all understood the gravity of the situation. I felt a tightness in my chest at the idea that such measures were necessary. The police station suddenly didn't feel so impenetrable, not after what we'd just heard. Klein's words clung to my mind like a dark fog. He's already here, watching. I found myself scanning the corners of the ceiling for security cameras or any place an observer might hide. Hayes walked us back to the main corridor. The station was quieter now. Most of the day shift had gone home, leaving a skeleton crew and a weary desk sergeant under the harsh lobby lights. Before we reached the exit, Hayes stopped and faced us. "Try to get some rest, both of you," he said. "We'll keep an eye on things here. I'll update you first thing in the morning if we learn anything overnight." Julia managed a faint, grateful smile. "Thank you, Detective," she murmured. I added my thanks as well. We were all exhausted, nerves frayed raw. As we finally pushed through the double doors into the foyer, a heavy sense of unreality settled over me. Only hours ago we believed catching Klein would end this nightmare. Now it felt as if we had merely opened a door to an even darker corridor. The echoes of Klein's twisted laughter and the image of that hidden room of horrors in Delaney's basement were burned into my mind. And there was something else, too. Something that made me shudder, even in the warm glow of the station's entrance. I could still feel Claire's presence. In the hum of the fluorescent lights, in the silence between our footfalls, in the chill that clung to me despite the heat kicking through the vents. It was as if her spirit walked beside us, unwilling to slip away until justice was truly served. Julia paused by the glass front doors, her reflection pale and ghost-like against the dark, rain-slicked street beyond. "It's not really over, is it?" she said softly. I shook my head. "No, not yet." Outside, rain had begun to patter against the pavement, the storm clouds finally unleashing their burden. I pulled open the door for Julia and we stepped out into the night. The air was cold and sharp with the smell of wet asphalt. Under the street lamp, Julia and I hesitated. A young officer stood nearby, the one Hayes had assigned to escort us home. His breath fogged in the chill as he gave a polite nod. Somewhere down the block, a car engine revved and then faded into the distance. I couldn't see much beyond the swaying silhouettes of trees and parked cars, but that prickling feeling of being watched crept over me once more. My eyes scanned the shadows among the rows of streetlights. Was there a darker shape lurking there, just out of sight? Someone sitting in a car, watching? I thought of Klein's ominous words. He's already here. A trick of my imagination, I tried to assure myself, just leftover paranoia. Even so, the hairs on my arm stood on end, and I edged a little closer to Julia. She must have felt it too. Julia wrapped her coat tightly around herself and moved nearer to me, her eyes roving nervously over the empty street. "Maybe we should," she began, but trailed off, uncertain how to finish the thought. "Go back inside? Find a hotel?" Nothing felt entirely safe. "It's okay," I murmured, trying to convince us both. "Detective Hayes has someone watching the house. We'll be okay." My words hung in the cold air, not entirely convincing. The officer cleared his throat gently. "I'll drive right behind you, ma'am," he assured Julia, "and I'll stay parked outside your residence until my shift ends. The moment you need anything, I'll be there." He was trying to sound comforting. I offered him a grateful, if weak, smile. "Thank you." We started toward Julia's car, which was parked under a flickering street lamp at the far end of the lot. The rain was falling steadier now, droplets tapping on the hood and roof as we climbed in. I slid into the passenger seat, every muscle in my body wound tight. Julia turned the ignition with trembling fingers. The police cruiser pulled out behind us, its headlights cutting twin beams through the darkness. Before Julia drove off, I stole one last glance at the police station entrance through the rain-blurred windshield. Lightning flashed, illuminating the glass doors and the lobby beyond in stark white for just a heartbeat. In that brief flash, I thought I saw someone standing just inside the station, watching us leave, a tall silhouette framed by the doorway. My breath caught. Another flash of lightning came an instant later and the figure was gone. The lobby stood empty. I wasn't sure if someone had really been there at all. My mind was playing tricks, or perhaps warning me. Julia noticed me staring. "What is it?" she asked, voice taut with anxiety. I forced myself to look away from the building. "Nothing," I lied softly. "Let's go." She nodded and eased the car away from the curb. The tires splashed through shimmering puddles as we started down the street. In the mirror, the glow of the police cruiser's headlights trailed us. A small comfort in the gloom. We rode in silence, the only sound the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers and the drumming rain. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had an unseen passenger in the back seat. At each flicker of passing headlights, I was tempted to glance into the rearview mirror, half expecting to meet Claire's eyes or see her spectral form glaring over our shoulders. I kept my gaze forward instead, jaw clenched, telling myself it was only my imagination. After a few blocks, Julia reached over and found my hand. Her fingers were cold but steady as she intertwined them with mine. I turned to her. In her drawn face, I saw a reflection of my own determination amid the fear. We had unearthed unspeakable secrets and confronted one of the monsters responsible. But it wasn't over. Not until every question was answered and every soul those men destroyed could rest in peace. In the quiet of the car, I almost thought I heard a soft sigh, like a voice carried on the hum of the heater. "Find the truth," it seemed to whisper. "Finish this." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, and in my mind's eye I imagined Claire in the back seat, her presence a gentle pressure urging us onward. A sharp crack of thunder made me jump, and I realized I had been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly, squeezing Julia's hand. A heavy dread coiled in my chest, but within it burned a small, fierce resolve. The true horror was far from over. Klein had all but guaranteed that. Whoever still lurked in the shadows, we would drag them into the light. No matter how deep into the darkness this path led, we would follow it to the end. For Claire, and for all the others still lost to the shadows. Julia and I drove into the storm-drenched night, the weight of our discoveries heavy on our shoulders, but the fire of justice burning brighter than ever. Each drop of rain on the windshield echoed the truths still waiting to be unearthed beneath Raven City's shadows. Though the path ahead twists deeper into darkness, we will follow it, no matter how far or how long, until every lost voice is finally heard. Darkness fears the light of truth. To be continued.
Every story has an end, but here the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.